single mom waitress fed a starving old woman. The next day, 100 wolves lined up outside her house. The coffee maker at Murphy's Diner had been broken for 3 days, but Clara Martinez kept brewing fresh pots anyway. She'd learned that small acts of normalcy could keep a person sane when everything else was falling apart. Tonight, like every night for the past 6 months, she moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her worn sneakers squeaking against the checkered linoleum floor. "Mama, look what I drew," came a small voice from the corner booth. Clara glanced over at her 7-year-old daughter Mia, who was sprawled across the cracked vinyl seat with a box of broken crayons. Even in the harsh fluorescent lighting, Mia's dark curls caught glints of gold, and her brown eyes, so much like Clara's own, sparkled with innocent pride. "That's beautiful, baby," Clara called softly, balancing 3 plates on her left arm while refilling a trucker's coffee with her right. "Is that us?" Mia nodded enthusiastically, holding up a drawing of 2 stick figures standing in front of a small house. The taller figure had long black hair and wore a pink dress, Clara's uniform. The smaller one had curly hair and a bright smile. Above them, Mia had colored a yellow sun with an unusually detailed face. "The sun's watching over us," Mia explained matter-of-factly, as if 7-year-olds everywhere drew celestial guardians. Clara's heart squeezed. Even at 7, Mia understood they needed watching over. The diner's bell chimed as the last customer of the evening, a long-haul trucker named Joe, dropped a crumpled $5 bill on his table and headed for the door. Clara pocketed the tip gratefully. Every dollar mattered when you were 3 weeks behind on rent. "Almost closing time, sweetheart," she told Mia, who had already started packing her crayons with the efficiency of a child who'd spent countless evenings in restaurant booths. That's when the bell chimed again. The woman who stumbled through the door looked like winter itself had followed her inside. Her silver hair hung in wet tangles around a face mapped with deep lines, and her clothes, a threadbare coat that might have once been blue, clung to her frail frame like soggy newspaper. But it was her eyes that made Clara pause mid-step. They were the palest gray Clara had ever seen, almost colorless, and they seemed to cut right through the diner's warm yellow light. The old woman swayed on her feet, one gnarled hand gripping the door frame while the other pressed against her stomach. Clara could hear her labored breathing from across the room. "We're closed," came a sharp voice from behind the counter. Belinda Crawford, the diner's night manager, emerged from the kitchen like a storm cloud in a hairnet. At 52, Belinda had the permanent scowl of someone who'd decided the world owed her something, and was tired of waiting for payment. Her small, dark eyes fixed on the old woman with undisguised disgust. "I said we're closed," Belinda repeated louder this time. "Can't you read the sign?" The old woman took another unsteady step forward. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I haven't eaten in I don't remember how long." "Not my problem." Belinda crossed her arms over her ample chest. "This isn't a soup kitchen. You want charity? Try the church down the road." Clara watched the exchange with growing discomfort. The old woman's lips had a blue tinge that spoke of more than just cold, and the way she swayed suggested she might collapse at any moment. "The church closed hours ago," the woman said, her strange eyes now focused on Clara with unsettling intensity. "Please, just something small." "You got money?" Belinda's voice cut like a blade. The woman's silence was answer enough. "Then get out." Belinda started around the counter, her movements sharp with irritation. "We're not running a charity here, and I won't have vagrants scaring off paying customers." "Belinda, wait," Clara started. "Don't." Belinda's finger jabbed toward Clara like a weapon. "You've got bills to pay and a kid to feed. Don't even think about it." But Clara was already thinking about it. She was thinking about the $12 in her tip jar, money that was supposed to buy Mia's lunch for the rest of the week. She was thinking about her own empty stomach, and the way hunger felt like a living thing gnawing at your insides. Most of all, She was thinking about those pale gray eyes and the desperation behind them. "How much for a bowl of soup and some bread?" Clara asked quietly. Belinda's face reddened. "Clara, I'm warning you." "$8.50, Clara continued, reaching into her apron pocket. "With coffee?" The old woman's eyes widened. For a moment, Clara could have sworn she saw something flicker in their colorless depths, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. "You can't be serious," Belinda hissed. "That money's supposed to last you." "It's my money." Clara's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she counted out 9 crumpled bills. "And my choice." She led the old woman to a table near Mia's booth, trying not to notice how the woman's coat left wet spots on the floor, or how her breathing seemed to rattle in her chest. Within minutes, Clara had set down a steaming bowl of chicken noodle soup, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and a cup of coffee black enough to wake the dead. The old woman ate with the careful precision of someone who'd learned not to waste a single drop. She didn't speak until the bowl was empty and the last crumb of bread had disappeared. Then she looked up at Clara with those unsettling eyes, and spoke in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of winter storms. "When the night howls, do not run. Stand tall." Clara blinked, taken aback by the sudden intensity in the woman's voice. "I'm sorry." But the old woman was already standing, moving toward the door with surprising grace for someone who'd been swaying with weakness just minutes before. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. "Your kindness will be remembered," she said, "and repaid." Then she was gone, leaving only the scent of pine needles, and something wild that Clara couldn't quite identify. "Crazy old bat," Belinda muttered, but she sounded more nervous than angry now. Clara cleared the table in silence, her mind replaying the woman's strange words. "When the night howls, do not run. Stand tall." It sounded like something from one of Mia's fairy tale books, cryptic and vaguely ominous. "Mama." Mia appeared at her elbow, clutching her drawing. The sad lady's eyes looked like the moon. Clara glanced down at her daughter, surprised. "What do you mean, baby?" "Big and round and glowy. Like she could see in the dark." A chill ran down Clara's spine, but she forced a smile. "That's just your imagination, sweetheart. Now help me finish cleaning up so we can go home." As they worked together, stacking chairs and wiping tables, Clara tried to push away the memory of those pale gray eyes. But deep in her chest, something had shifted. Something that felt like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air goes still and electric. Outside, the November wind picked up, rattling the diner's windows like fingers tapping against glass. And somewhere in the distance, Clara could have sworn she heard something that sounded almost like howling. Clara's eyes snapped open to a sound that didn't belong in suburban Montana. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed 5:47 a.m., but the darkness outside her bedroom window seemed absolute, as if dawn had forgotten to come. The sound came again, low, mournful, and unmistakably wild. Howling. At first, Clara thought she might be dreaming. Their little rental house sat on the edge of Millbrook, where the town gradually gave way to farmland and distant mountains, but wolves hadn't been seen in this area for decades. Yet the sound was definitely coming from somewhere close. Too close. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor, and crept to the window. What she saw made her blood freeze in her veins. They were everywhere. Dozens of wolves sat in perfect formation around her small yard, as still as statues carved from shadow and moonlight. They formed neat rows, their massive bodies arranged with military precision, some as large as small horses, others sleek and lean. Their fur ranged from midnight black to silver gray to pure white, and every single pair of eyes reflected the porch light like tiny stars. "This isn't real," Clara whispered to herself, pressing her palms against the cool glass. "This can't be real." But as she watched, one of the wolves, a magnificent creature with fur the color of fresh snow, turned its massive head toward her window. Their eyes met through the glass, and Clara felt her knees go weak. The wolf didn't snarl or bare its teeth. Instead, it lowered its great head in what could only be described as a bow. Then, like a ripple spreading through still water, every other wolf followed suit. Dozens of powerful predators, bowing in unison toward her bedroom window. Clara stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs. The movement of her white nightgown must have caught their attention because when she looked again, every wolf had lifted its head to watch her. "Mama?" Mia's sleepy voice came from the doorway. "What's the scary noise?" "Stay back, baby," Clara whispered urgently, but Mia was already padding across the room in her purple pajamas, drawn by curiosity that 7-year-olds couldn't resist. Mia pressed her face against the window, and Clara held her breath, expecting screams or tears. Instead, Mia's eyes went wide with wonder. "Wow," she breathed. "Look how many there are. They're beautiful." As if responding to Mia's voice, the wolves shifted again. This time, several of them, including the white one, moved closer to the house until they were just yards from the window. But their movements held no aggression, no predatory stalking. They approached like subjects greeting royalty. "Mama, they're bowing to us," Mia said with the matter-of-fact acceptance that only children possessed. "Like we're princesses." Clara wrapped her arms around her daughter, torn between protection and amazement. "We need to call someone. The police or—" The sound of car doors slamming interrupted her thought. Through the front window, she could see the first of their neighbors emerging from houses up and down the street. Mrs. Henderson from next door stood on her front porch in her bathrobe, phone pressed to her ear. Across the street, old Mr. Kowalski had his hunting rifle in his hands. Within minutes, Clara's quiet street had transformed into chaos. More neighbors appeared, some shouting questions, others talking rapidly into cell phones. She could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had definitely called the authorities. But through it all, the wolves remained eerily calm. They didn't pace or growl, or show any signs of agitation despite the growing crowd of humans. They simply sat and waited, as if they were keeping vigil. "Clara." Mrs. Henderson's voice carried across the yards. "Are you and Mia okay in there?" Clara cracked open her front door, keeping the security chain latched. "We're fine. Don't come any closer. I don't know what they want." "Sheriff's on his way," called Mr. Kowalski. "You just stay put. We'll handle this." But even as he spoke, Clara noticed something strange. Every time she or Mia appeared at a window, the wolves' attention focused on them with laser intensity. Yet when the neighbors moved around or shouted, the pack barely seemed to notice. It was as if the only humans that mattered to them were the two inside this particular house. "Mrs. Martinez," a new voice called out. Clara recognized Tommy Brennan, the newspaper boy, standing at the edge of her driveway with his phone held high, recording everything. Even at this early hour, word was spreading fast in their small town. "Do you know why they're here?" Tommy called. "Did you do something to attract them?" Before Clara could answer, she heard Mrs. Chun from down the street talking loudly to someone on her phone. "Looks like some kind of devil worship situation. I always said there was something odd about that woman." "It's not devil worship," snapped Mrs. Henderson, defending Clara despite her own fear. "Don't be ridiculous." But Clara could see the way some neighbors were looking at her house now, with suspicion mixed with their fear. In a town like Millbrook, unexplained events quickly became the subject of wild theories, and single mothers were often the first to be blamed when things went wrong. As the sirens grew louder, Clara found herself thinking about the old woman from the diner. Those pale gray eyes, the strange words. "When the night howls, do not run. Stand tall." The night was definitely howling now. But standing tall felt impossible when your world had just been turned upside down by an army of wolves who seemed to think you were their queen. "Mama," Mia whispered, still watching the wolves with fascination rather than fear. "I think they're protecting us." Clara looked down at her daughter. then back at the magnificent creatures arranged around their home like living guardians. Deep in her gut, she was beginning to suspect Mia might be right. But protected from what? By noon, Sheriff Darius Cole had consumed 4 cups of coffee and developed what felt like a permanent knot between his shoulder blades. He stood on Clara's front porch, his weathered face grim as he studied the wolves that had now settled into what appeared to be a permanent encampment around the Martinez house. "This is day 2, Clara," he said through the screen door, his Texas drawl more pronounced when he was stressed. "I've got calls coming in from 3 counties over. Fish and Wildlife is sending a team. And if those wolves don't disperse soon, they're bringing tranquilizer guns. And if those don't work..." He didn't need to finish. Clara understood. "They haven't hurt anyone," she said quietly, bouncing baby Mia on her hip despite her daughter's protests that she was too big to be carried. "They're just sitting there." For now, Sheriff Cole adjusted his hat, a gesture Clara had learned meant he was about to deliver bad news. "But I've got hunters driving in from Billings, Great Falls, even some boys from Wyoming. Word's spreading that there's a pack this size just sitting pretty. They're calling it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Through the window, Clara could see pickup trucks lined along the street, their beds loaded with rifle cases and camouflage gear. Men in hunting jackets stood in clusters, pointing at the wolves and talking in low, excited voices. The wolves, for their part, remained perfectly still, as if they were made of stone. "Those hunters can't just start shooting," Clara said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Not on your property, no. But the moment one of those wolves steps foot on public land," Sheriff Cole shook his head. "I can't protect them outside your yard, Clara. And I'm running out of reasons to keep those boys from setting up blinds in the forest." As if summoned by their conversation, a familiar voice cut through the morning air. "It's unnatural, is what it is." Belinda Crawford stood at the edge of Clara's driveway, addressing a growing crowd of neighbors and curiosity seekers like she was delivering a sermon. Her hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, and she wore her Sunday dress, the blue one she reserved for important occasions. "Mark my words," Belinda continued, her voice rising. "This isn't some coincidence. You don't get 100 wolves showing up overnight without someone calling them. And we all know what kind of person deals with wild beasts." "What are you suggesting, Belinda?" asked Mrs. Henderson, though her tone suggested she already knew. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts." Belinda's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "That woman's been acting strange for months, working late nights, muttering to herself, filling her daughter's head with all sorts of nonsense about spirits and guardians. And now this." Clara felt her face burn. It was true that she'd been teaching Mia about their Mexican heritage, stories her grandmother had told her about protective spirits and the old ways. But that hardly made her a witch. "You think Clara summoned these wolves?" The question came from Tom Bradley, who owned the hardware store. "I think," Belinda said carefully, "that some people dabble in things they shouldn't. Devil worship, cult rituals, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes those chickens come home to roost." A murmur ran through the crowd. Clara could see the doubt in some faces, but others were nodding thoughtfully. Fear made people want simple explanations, even impossible ones. "That's enough," Sheriff Cole's voice cut through the chatter with authority. "Unless you've got evidence of actual wrongdoing, Belinda, I suggest you take your theories elsewhere." But the damage was done. Clara could see it in the way some neighbors avoided eye contact, in the hurried way Mrs. Chun ushered her children inside when they walked too close to Clara's yard. "Mama," Mia whispered, "can I go outside? I want to see the pretty one up close." Clara followed her daughter's gaze to where a single wolf sat apart from the others, positioned directly beneath the large oak tree in their front yard. This one was smaller than the rest, with fur like liquid silver that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Unlike the others, who maintained their military formation, this wolf had crept closer to the house each hour, Until now it was barely 10 feet from their front steps. Absolutely not, Clara said firmly. You stay inside where it's safe. But even as she spoke, Clara found herself studying the silver wolf. Its posture was different from the others, less formal, more protective. When the hunters had arrived that morning, this wolf had positioned itself directly between them and the house. When children from the neighborhood had tried to approach with their parents, it had stood and taken a single step forward, not aggressive, but warning. Now, as Mia pressed her face against the window, the wolf's head turned toward her. Clara held her breath, expecting to see predatory calculation in those amber eyes. Instead, she saw something that looked remarkably like gentle curiosity. The wolf tilted its head slightly, studying Mia with the same intensity Mia was using to study it. Then, impossible as it seemed, Clara could have sworn the animal smiled. It likes me, Mia said with absolute certainty. It's lonely. It's a wild animal, sweetheart, not a pet. But Clara found herself wondering if that was entirely true. The silver wolf's behavior was unlike anything she'd read about in nature documentaries. It seemed less like a predator and more like a guardian assigned specifically to watch over one small girl. As the afternoon wore on, the tension outside continued to build. More hunters arrived. Belinda's theories grew more elaborate. The wolves never moved. And deep inside the house, Clara made coffee she didn't want and watched her daughter watch the silver wolf that seemed to be watching her back. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were all waiting for something. The question was, what? Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind began to pick up, carrying with it the scent of pine and something wilder. Something was coming. The knock came at exactly midnight. Clara had finally managed to get Mia to sleep, though her daughter had insisted on keeping her bedroom curtains open, so she could watch her silver wolf through the window. Now Clara sat at her kitchen table, nursing her third cup of coffee, and trying to make sense of the impossible situation that had become her life. The sound of knuckles against wood made her jump, nearly spilling the lukewarm coffee across the table. Through the front window, she could see the wolves still maintaining their vigil, but they had shifted positions slightly, creating a clear path from the street to her front door. Clara crept to the window beside the door and peered through the corner of the curtain. Her breath caught in her throat. The woman standing on her porch bore only a passing resemblance to the frail, desperate creature who had stumbled into Murphy's diner 2 nights ago. This woman stood tall and straight, her silver hair now flowing in neat waves around a face that seemed decades younger. She wore a long black coat that looked expensive, and her pale gray eyes, those same unsettling eyes, seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. "I know you're there, Clara," the woman said, her voice carrying easily through the door. "We need to talk." Against every instinct screaming at her to keep the door locked, Clara found herself turning the deadbolt. The woman stepped inside with fluid grace, and Clara caught that same scent from the diner, pine needles and something wild and untamed. "You're not the same person," Clara whispered, backing toward the kitchen. "You're not. How is this possible?" The woman smiled, and for the first time, her expression held warmth instead of desperation. "I am exactly the same person, dear one. But I no longer need to pretend to be weak." "Pretend." Clara's voice rose sharply, then dropped to a whisper as she remembered Mia sleeping upstairs. "What do you mean, pretend?" "My name is Evelyn Blackwood," the woman said, settling into Clara's kitchen chair as if she belonged there. "And I have come to explain why my family has taken such an interest in you." Clara remained standing, every muscle in her body tense for flight. "Your family?" Evelyn gestured toward the window, where the shapes of the wolves were visible in the moonlight. "Those magnificent creatures outside are my son's people. His warriors, his protectors, his pack. They follow him with absolute loyalty, and they have been waiting here for 2 days because he commanded them to guard you." "That's impossible," Clara said, though even as the words left her mouth, She knew she no longer believed in impossible things. Is it? Evelyn's eyes seemed to catch and hold the light. You felt it, didn't you? In the diner? The moment you chose kindness over self-preservation? You felt something shift in the air around us. Clara had felt it. That electric moment when their eyes had met across the table. When something in the world had seemed to click into place. What are you? Clara asked quietly. I am the mother of an alpha, Evelyn said with quiet pride. The mother of the wolf who rules this territory and all the shapeshifters within it. My son Rowan leads one of the most powerful packs in North America, and for the past week he has been fighting for his life. Shapeshifters. The word hung in the air between them like a bridge Clara wasn't sure she was ready to cross. There is another pack, Evelyn continued, her voice hardening. Rogues who have been challenging territorial boundaries, killing innocents, making our kind vulnerable to discovery by humans. Rowan tried to stop them, to protect both our people and yours. The battle was fierce, and he was gravely injured. He's hidden somewhere in these mountains, healing but vulnerable. Why are you telling me this? Clara's hands shook as she gripped the back of a kitchen chair. Because, dear Clara, I needed to know if there were still humans worthy of our protection. Evelyn stood gracefully, moving to the window where she could see the wolves. I came to your diner in my most vulnerable form, testing the compassion of your kind. Most humans looked at me with disgust, with judgment, with fear. They saw only a burden to be avoided. Clara remembered the moment vividly, Belinda's cruelty, the old woman's desperation, her own choice to act despite the cost. But you, Evelyn turned back to Clara, her pale eyes intense. You saw someone who needed help, and you gave it without hesitation. You paid for money you could not afford to lose. You fed me when I was nothing but a stranger in need. It was just soup, Clara whispered. It was everything. Evelyn's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. You proved that there are still humans who choose kindness over cruelty, generosity over greed. You proved yourself worthy of our protection. I don't want protection. The words burst out of Clara louder than she'd intended. I don't want any of this. I just want to take care of my daughter and live a normal life. Evelyn's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy. You gave me food when I was nothing, Clara Martinez. Now my son's people will give you everything, even their lives if necessary. The bond has been forged. It cannot be undone. What bond? I didn't agree to any bond. The bond of pack and protectorate, Evelyn said simply. You are marked now as family. Those wolves outside will die before they let harm come to you or your daughter. And Mia, Evelyn's eyes grew distant. Mia has already been chosen by one of our finest young warriors. The Silver Wolf has claimed her as his charge. Clara thought of her daughter's fascination with the Silver Wolf, the way it seemed to respond to her presence. This is insane, she said. People will think I've lost my mind. The whole town already suspects me of devil worship or worse. And now you're telling me I'm connected to a pack of werewolves. Not connected, Evelyn corrected gently. Protected. But Clara, you must understand. Walking away is no longer an option. The rival pack knows Rowan is vulnerable. They will come for him. And when they do, they will try to destroy everything he cares about. Including you. The kitchen fell silent except for the distant sound of wind through the trees. Clara sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the weight of information that seemed to reshape everything she thought she knew about the world. I never asked for this, she whispered. No, Evelyn agreed. But you chose it the moment you showed mercy to a stranger. And now, dear one, we must prepare for what comes next. Outside, one of the wolves howled. A long, mournful sound that seemed to carry both warning and promise. The real battle was about to begin. Clara had barely slept when the screaming started. At 3 a.m., she jolted awake to the sound of Mia's terrified cries coming from the bedroom down the hall. Clara's feet hit the cold floor running, her heart hammering as she burst through her daughter's doorway. Mama. Mama, look. Mia pointed a shaking finger toward her bedroom window, tears streaming down her face. Clara followed her daughter's gaze and felt her blood turn to ice. At the edge of their property, barely visible in the moonlight, lay a massive shape that dwarfed even the largest wolves in the pack. This creature was enormous, easily the size of a small horse, with fur so black it seemed to absorb the darkness around it. And it was clearly dying. The wolf's sides heaved with labored breathing, and even from this distance, Clara could see the dark stains of blood matting its fur. The other wolves had broken their perfect formation for the first time in 3 days, clustering around their fallen leader with obvious distress. Something's wrong with the big one, Mia whispered, wiping her nose on her pajama sleeve. It's hurt bad. Clara was already moving, pulling on her robe and slippers. Every rational part of her mind screamed that approaching a wounded predator was suicide, but something deeper, some instinct she didn't understand, was pulling her toward that suffering animal. Stay here, she told Mia firmly. Lock the door behind me and don't come out no matter what you hear. But when Clara reached the front door, she found Evelyn already standing on the porch, her face pale with worry. He's dying, Evelyn said without preamble. Rowan pushed himself too hard trying to reach you. The wounds from the battle have reopened. Clara looked at the massive black wolf, then back at Evelyn. That's your son. In his wolf form, yes. But he needs to shift back to heal properly, and he doesn't have the strength. Evelyn's voice cracked with emotion. Clara, I know this is much to ask, but he needs sanctuary. A safe place to transform and recover. He's enormous, Clara breathed. How do I know he won't hurt us? Because, Evelyn said softly, Rowan would rather die than harm someone under his protection. As if summoned by their conversation, the giant wolf lifted its massive head and fixed its gaze on Clara. Even from 50 yards away, she could see the intelligence burning in those amber eyes. Ancient, weary, but unmistakably human. Then, with a sound that was part growl and part scream, the wolf began to change. Clara watched in horrified fascination as the creature's form rippled and shifted, bones cracking and reforming, fur receding to reveal pale skin. The transformation was clearly agonizing. The wounded animal's cries of pain made Clara's chest ache with sympathy. When it was over, a man lay collapsed at the edge of her yard. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with shoulder-length black hair, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His body was covered in scars, some old and silvery, others fresh and bleeding. A particularly nasty wound stretched across his left shoulder and down his chest, seeping blood onto the grass beneath him. Help me get him inside, Evelyn said, already moving toward her son. Clara wanted to refuse. She wanted to lock her door and pretend none of this was happening. Instead, she found herself supporting the unconscious man's weight as she and Evelyn half-carried, half-dragged him toward the house. He was heavier than he looked, all muscle and bone, and his skin burned with fever. Blood from his wounds stained Clara's white nightgown, but she barely noticed. Up close, she could see that his face, despite its hard edges, was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of features that belonged in Renaissance paintings. They managed to get him onto Clara's living room couch, though his long legs hung over the armrest. Evelyn immediately began examining his wounds with practiced efficiency. I need hot water, clean towels, and whatever medical supplies you have, she said briskly. These cuts are infected. Clara was gathering supplies from her bathroom when Mia appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. Is that the Wolf King? She asked in an odd whisper. Go back to bed, sweetheart, Clara said automatically, but Mia was already padding down the stairs in her bare feet. He's hurt, Mia observed, approaching the couch with the fearlessness of childhood. We should help him. The man, Rowan, stirred at the sound of her voice, his amber eyes fluttering open. When he saw Mia standing nearby, something in his expression softened. "Little guardian," he whispered, his voice rough with pain and exhaustion. "You're safe." Mia beamed at him as if he'd given her the greatest compliment in the world. "The silver wolf told me you were coming. He was worried about you." Rowan's mouth curved in what might have been a smile before another wave of pain made him grimace. Over the next hour, Clara found herself playing battlefield medic to a werewolf alpha while her 7-year-old daughter chattered away to him about her drawings and her favorite cartoons. It was, without question, the strangest night of her life. As Clara cleaned and bandaged Rowan's wounds, Evelyn paced by the window, her anxiety palpable. "They know he's here," she said suddenly. "The rival pack. They can smell his blood." "How long do we have?" Clara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Not long." Evelyn's face was grim. "Marcus, the rival alpha, has been hunting Rowan for months. If he finds him while he's this weak..." She didn't need to finish. Clara could see the fear in the older woman's eyes. "What happens if Rowan dies?" Clara asked quietly, glancing at Mia, who had fallen asleep curled up in the armchair beside the couch. "Marcus becomes the undisputed ruler of this territory," Evelyn said. "And his pack. They don't distinguish between human and shifter when it comes to eliminating threats. Everyone who helped us, everyone Rowan has protected, they'll all be considered enemies." Outside, the wind picked up, and Clara could have sworn she heard something in the distance that sounded like howling. But this howling was different from the mournful calls of Rowan's pack. This sound was full of hunger and rage. "They're coming," Evelyn whispered. Clara looked at the wounded man on her couch, at her sleeping daughter, at the woman who had brought this supernatural war to her doorstep. 3 days ago, her biggest worry had been paying rent on time. Now she was apparently standing between an injured werewolf and his enemies, with nothing but good intentions and a strong sense of right and wrong to protect them all. The howling grew closer. Clara had made the mistake of thinking the danger would come from the forest. She should have known it would come from much closer to home. The next morning, while Rowan slept fitfully on her couch and Evelyn kept watch by the window, Clara realized they needed supplies. Medical bandages, antibiotics, food. Taking care of a wounded alpha was exhausting their resources fast. "I have to go into town," she told Evelyn quietly, checking to make sure Mia was still occupied with her coloring books. "We need more first aid supplies, and I can't exactly order them online without raising questions." Evelyn's pale eyes were troubled. "It's not safe. Marcus's scouts could be anywhere." "It's less safe to let Rowan's wounds get infected," Clara pointed out. "Besides, it's broad daylight. Your wolves are still out there. How dangerous can a trip to the pharmacy be?" Famous last words. Murphy's pharmacy sat on Main Street between the hardware store and the post office, and Clara had been shopping there since she'd moved to Millbrook. Old Mr. Murphy knew everyone's business and dispensed advice along with prescriptions, but he was harmless enough. Clara was reaching for a box of gauze when she heard familiar voices from the next aisle over. "Told you, I know exactly where they're keeping him." Clara froze, recognizing Belinda's voice immediately. But the woman talking to her manager sounded different, sharper, more calculating than usual. "You're certain he's at the Martinez house?" The second voice was male, smooth and cultured with just a hint of an accent Clara couldn't place. "Positive," Belinda said, her voice full of self-importance. "I saw them carrying someone inside last night. Big man, covered in blood. Had to be him." Clara crept closer to the end of the aisle, careful to keep out of sight. Through a gap in the shelving, she could see Belinda standing close to a tall man in an expensive black suit. He looked like he belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a small-town pharmacy. Perfectly groomed dark hair, sharp features, and an aura of controlled power that made Clara's skin crawl. "And you're willing to provide more detailed information?" the man asked, his tone conversational but with an undercurrent that made Clara think of ice over deep water. For the right price, Belinda said boldly. I know you've been looking for this person. I know he's worth something to you. The man smiled, and Clara felt her blood run cold. There was nothing human in that expression, just predatory satisfaction. Indeed he is. And your assistance will be generously rewarded. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. There's more where this came from, once the job is complete. Belinda's eyes went wide at the sight of the money. What exactly do you need me to do? Simply ensure that the Martinez woman and her daughter are away from the house tonight. Take them somewhere public, keep them occupied. Leave the rest to us. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. This man, whoever he was planning something for tonight. And Belinda, motivated by greed and spite, was helping him. What about the wolves? Belinda asked nervously. There's still dozens of them around the property. The man's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed just a little too sharp. Let me worry about the wolves. Clara backed away from the shelf as quietly as she could, her mind racing. She needed to get home, needed to warn Evelyn and Rowan. But first, she had to get these supplies. Her hands shook as she gathered bandages, antiseptic, and pain medication. At the checkout counter, old Mr. Murphy gave her a concerned look. You're awful pale, dear. Everything all right? Just tired, Clara managed, though her voice sounded strange even to her own ears. She was halfway to her car when she realized Belinda and the mysterious man had left the pharmacy. A sleek black sedan was pulling away from the curb, its windows too dark to see through. But Clara caught a glimpse of the license plate, out of state from Wyoming. The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of Clara's life. When she finally pulled into her driveway, she was relieved to see Rowan's wolves still maintaining their protective circle around the house. But something felt different. The animals seemed more agitated, their heads turning constantly as if tracking movement in the surrounding forest. Inside, Evelyn took one look at Clara's face and immediately went on high alert. What happened? Clara quickly explained what she'd overheard, watching Evelyn's expression grow darker with each word. Marcus, Evelyn said grimly. He's here in town, and he's recruited local help. Who's Marcus? Clara asked, though she was pretty sure she didn't want to know. The rival Alpha, Rowan's half-brother. The family connection hit Clara like a physical blow. His brother? Different mothers, same father, Evelyn explained tersely. Marcus has always resented Rowan's position as heir to the territory. When their father died, Marcus challenged Rowan's leadership. The pack chose Rowan, but Marcus has never accepted that decision. A groan from the living room interrupted their conversation. Rowan was trying to sit up, his face pale with pain and effort. Did you say Marcus is here? He asked, his voice rough. Clara overheard him making plans with a local woman, Evelyn said. They're planning something for tonight. Rowan's amber eyes blazed with anger, but Clara could see how much the simple act of sitting up had cost him. He was in no condition to fight anyone, let alone another alpha. That evening, as the sun began to set, the wolves outside grew increasingly restless. Even Mia noticed the change, abandoning her coloring to peer out the window with concern. Something's wrong, she said quietly. The silver one keeps looking at the forest like he's scared. Clara looked out to see the silver wolf, Mia's special guardian, pacing back and forth at the edge of the yard. His ears were pinned back, his body tense with alertness. They're coming, Rowan said from the couch, struggling to stand despite Evelyn's protests. I can smell them. That's when the lights went out. The house plunged into darkness just as shapes emerged from the treeline. Not wolves, but men. At least a dozen of them, moving with inhuman speed and coordination toward the house. Mia, get down, Clara shouted, but her daughter was frozen at the window, staring in terror as the silver wolf broke formation, and charged toward the approaching enemies. What happened next would haunt Clara's dreams for years to come. The silver wolf, beautiful, loyal, devoted, threw himself at the lead attacker with fearless determination. Clara heard the sounds of snarling, of impact, of something that might have been bone-breaking. Then silence. When the motion sensor lights finally flickered back on, the silver wolf lay motionless on the grass, his magnificent fur stained dark with blood. Mia's scream of anguish cut through the night like a blade. And from somewhere in the darkness, Clara heard laughter, cold, cruel, and entirely too human. The sound of Mia's broken-hearted sobbing seemed to break something fundamental inside Rowan. Clara watched in amazement as the wounded alpha pushed himself off the couch, his injuries forgotten in the face of his fury. The air around him began to shimmer with heat, and she could hear the ominous sound of bones beginning to crack and reshape. "No," Evelyn said sharply, placing a restraining hand on her son's shoulder. "You're not strong enough for a full shift. It could kill you." "Then I'll die protecting what's mine," Rowan snarled, his voice already taking on an inhuman quality. His amber eyes had begun to glow with an inner fire that made Clara's skin prickle. Outside, the sounds of battle erupted as Rowan's pack engaged the attackers. Howls, snarls, and the terrible sounds of clashing bodies filled the night air. Through the windows, Clara could see flashes of movement, gray and brown and black shapes locked in deadly combat. "We have to get out of here," Evelyn said urgently, scooping up Mia despite the child's protests. "The house isn't safe." Clara grabbed her daughter's hand and followed Evelyn toward the back door. But they were too late. The sliding glass door exploded inward in a shower of sparkling fragments as a massive shape crashed through. The wolf that landed on Clara's kitchen floor was almost as large as Rowan, with fur the color of dark chocolate and eyes like burning coals. But unlike Rowan's noble bearing, this creature radiated malice and barely controlled rage. Marcus. Even in wolf form, Clara could see the family resemblance. The same powerful build, the same intelligent eyes. But where Rowan's gaze held warmth and protection, Marcus's held only hunger and conquest. "Hello, brother," came a voice from the shattered doorway. Marcus shifted back to human form with fluid ease, revealing a man who looked remarkably like Rowan, but with harder edges and a cruel smile. He wore dark clothes that emphasized his lean, dangerous build, and his hair was the same black as his brother's but cut shorter, more controlled. "Still playing protector to the humans, I see," Marcus continued, his gaze moving dismissively over Clara and Mia before settling on his wounded brother. "How pathetically noble of you." Rowan had managed a partial transformation. His hands had become clawed, his teeth lengthened to fangs, but he remained fundamentally human. The effort was clearly costing him. Sweat beaded on his forehead and his breathing was labored. "Leave them out of this," Rowan growled. "Your fight is with me." "Oh, but they're part of it now," Marcus said with mock sadness. "The moment you chose to protect them, they became legitimate targets. Pack law, brother. Surely you remember." The two alphas began to circle each other in Clara's small kitchen, and she realized with growing horror that she and Mia were trapped between them, and the only exit. That's when Evelyn stepped forward. "Enough," she said quietly, but her voice carried such authority that both men froze. "You want to fight, Marcus? Then fight me first." Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "An old woman? Please. I have no quarrel with." His words cut off abruptly as Evelyn began to change. Clara had seen Rowan's transformation, had witnessed the painful process of human becoming wolf. But Evelyn's shift was different, faster, more fluid, and absolutely terrifying in its power. Within seconds, where the elegant older woman had stood, there was now a wolf unlike any Clara had ever imagined. Evelyn's wolf form was enormous, easily twice the size of Marcus, with fur so white it seemed to glow in the darkness. Her pale gray eyes had become twin moons, and when she opened her massive jaws, her fangs gleamed like ivory daggers. Marcus actually took a step backward, his arrogant confidence wavering for the first time. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're supposed to be past your prime. Your shifting days should be over." Evelyn's response was a growl that seemed to shake the entire house. "Take Mia and run," Rowan commanded Clara without taking his eyes off his brother. "Head for the forest. My pack will find you." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to help, but Mia was trembling in her arms and the kitchen had become a war zone. She grabbed her daughter and bolted for the front door just as the 3 wolves behind her erupted into savage combat. The night outside was chaos. Rowan's pack was engaged in desperate battle with Marcus's raiders throughout the yard and into the surrounding trees. Clara could see bodies, both human and wolf, scattered across her once peaceful lawn. The silver wolf lay motionless near the oak tree, and the sight sent fresh tears streaming down Mia's face. "This way," Clara whispered, pulling her daughter toward the tree line. If they could reach the forest, maybe they could hide until this nightmare was over. They had almost made it to safety when one of Marcus's wolves broke away from the main battle and came after them. The creature was lean and scarred, with yellow eyes full of bloodlust. Clara pushed Mia behind her and grabbed a fallen tree branch, knowing it was useless but unable to just stand there defensively. The wolf gathered itself to spring and was suddenly tackled by a flash of white fur. Evelyn had followed them, her massive wolf form moving with impossible speed and grace. She and the attacking wolf rolled across the ground in a snarling tangle of teeth and claws. When they separated, Marcus's soldier lay still, and Evelyn stood over him with blood on her muzzle. From the house came a sound that made Clara's bones ache, the roar of an alpha claiming victory. Through the broken windows, she could see 2 figures grappling in the wreckage of her kitchen. Rowan, despite his injuries, had Marcus pinned against the wall, his clawed hand at his brother's throat. "Yield," Rowan commanded, his voice barely human. Marcus's response was to laugh. "Never. I'll see this whole territory burn before I bow to you." "Then burn," Rowan said quietly, and Clara had to look away from what happened next. When the fighting finally stopped, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Marcus's surviving pack members had fled into the wilderness, leaderless and broken. Rowan's wolves gathered around their alpha, many injured but all alive. The silver wolf was not among them. Mia knelt beside her fallen guardian, her small hands stroking his still fur as tears fell onto his silver coat. Even in death he looked peaceful, as if he had died knowing his duty was complete. "He saved us," Mia whispered. "He was brave." Rowan, back in human form and supported by 2 of his pack members, knelt beside her. His brother's blood stained his hands, but his expression was gentle as he looked at the grieving child. "The bravest," he agreed softly. "He died a warrior's death, protecting what mattered most. That's all any of us can ask for." As the sun rose over Millbrook, Clara stood in the ruins of her former life and realized that nothing would ever be the same again. But somehow, she thought that might not be entirely a bad thing. The morning light painted the battlefield in shades of gold and crimson, revealing the true cost of the night's violence. Clara's house bore the scars of supernatural warfare: shattered windows, a destroyed kitchen, claw marks gouged deep into the wooden siding. Her carefully tended garden was trampled. Her white picket fence lay in splinters, and blood stained the grass where friends and enemies had fallen. But they had won. Marcus's pack had been utterly defeated, their survivors scattered to the winds without a leader to follow. The threat that had hung over Rowan's territory for months was finally ended, and the rival Alpha would never again challenge the natural order. Sheriff Cole arrived as the last of the wounded were being tended to, took one look at the devastation, and quietly put away his notepad. Some things, Clara realized, were beyond the scope of human law enforcement. "Property damage from the storm last night," he told Clara with a meaningful look. "Insurance should cover most of it." Clara nodded gratefully. In a town like Millbrook, Sometimes willful blindness was the kindest gift neighbors could offer each other. As the sheriff drove away, Evelyn approached Clara with the formal bearing of someone about to make an official pronouncement. The pack had gathered around them, wounded but victorious wolves in both human and animal form, their attention focused on their alpha's mother with respectful attention. "Clara Martinez," Evelyn began, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "By your kindness to a stranger, you have proven yourself worthy of our highest trust. By your courage in sheltering our wounded alpha, you have shown yourself to be true pack." Clara felt her cheeks burn as dozens of predatory eyes fixed on her with approval and gratitude. "I hereby declare you and your daughter Mia to be under the eternal protection of the Blackwood Pack," Evelyn continued. "From this day forward, you are honorary members of our family, with all the rights and privileges that entails." A chorus of howls rose from the assembled wolves, not mournful this time, but celebratory. It was, Clara realized, their way of welcoming her home. Rowan stepped forward, moving slowly but under his own power. His injuries were healing with supernatural speed, though Clara could see he would carry some scars for the rest of his life. They seemed to suit him, adding to rather than diminishing his natural authority. "You fed my mother when she was alone," he said, his amber eyes serious and sincere. "You saved my people. From this day forward, no harm will ever come to you." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. 3 days ago, she had been a struggling single mother with an uncertain future. Now she found herself part of something larger, something that would protect and value her for as long as she lived. "I don't know how to be part of a pack," she admitted quietly. Rowan's scarred face softened into a genuine smile. "You already are. You chose to help when help was needed. You stood your ground when others would have run. You protected what was precious to you at any cost." He glanced toward Mia, who was still kneeling beside the silver wolf's body. "That's all pack really means." As if summoned by their conversation, several of the younger wolves approached Mia. Clara tensed, but she needn't have worried. The wolves lay down around her daughter in a protective circle, offering comfort in their own way. One of them, a young female with coat the color of autumn leaves, gently nuzzled Mia's shoulder. "She'll be pack sister to my wolves," Rowan explained. "They'll watch over her as she grows, teach her our ways if she chooses to learn them. The silver wolf's protection lives on in all of us." The morning sun climbed higher as Rowan's pack began to prepare for their departure. They moved with efficient purpose, gathering their wounded and erasing the evidence of their presence. Soon, Clara thought, it would be as if the supernatural battle had never happened at all. Rowan himself began to change, his human form rippling and shifting until the massive black wolf stood before them once more. His pack gathered around their alpha, ready to follow him back into the wilderness where they belonged. But as they reached the edge of the forest, one wolf separated from the group, the young female who had comforted Mia. She took up position at the tree-line, sitting with perfect stillness as she faced Clara's house. Clara understood. Even as the pack returned to their hidden world, they would never truly leave. There would always be a guardian watching, always be protection in the shadows. As Clara stood in her ruined yard with Mia's small hand clasped firmly in hers, Evelyn's words from that first night finally made perfect sense. "When the night howls, do not run. Stand tall." The night had indeed howled, bringing with it dangers Clara could never have imagined. But she had stood tall. She had faced the impossible with courage and compassion, and in doing so, she had found her place in a world far more magical and dangerous than she'd ever dreamed. The supernatural war was over. The pack was safe, and Clara Martinez, former waitress and struggling single mother, had become something she never expected. She had become family. In the distance, a lone wolf's howl echoed through the mountains, not a call of warning or sorrow, but a song of homecoming. Clara smiled and squeezed her daughter's hand. They were home.